Hello and welcome to another episode of Learn the TOEFL the Easy Way with Teacher Fish. So, our lesson for today is about the listening section of the TOEFL. However, before we discuss about listening question types, we will first focus on note-taking process, your best weapon for the listening section. While most trust their memory when engaged with a listening exercise, in the listening section of the TOEFL, note-taking will surely increase your chances of getting a perfect score. There are two types of passages in this section, conversation and lecture, and they are both lengthy. A conversation may run for about 3 minutes, sometimes a little longer, while a typical lecture will run for at least 5 minutes. So just imagine the amount of information that a test taker needs to store in his or her memory, if not going to note-take. What are the importance of note-taking, you may ask? First, it helps you remember what you heard. Again, consider the amount of information you will hear. Trusting your memory might not be the best option. Next, note-taking helps you to concentrate and listen effectively. However, be sure that you balance note-taking and listening. I mean, similar to trusting your memory, only paying attention to what to take notes also isn't the best option. That being said, another benefit of note-taking is that you are able to select what to note down, hence, increases understanding of the passage. Lastly, note-taking functions as an outline of what the speaker or speakers talk about. It should act as a guide to listening, and it helps identify key information, which are usually what the listening section will ask about. And so, there are two note-taking methods that I and my students found very useful for the TOEFL listening section. They are what we call the linear method and the two-column process. Linear method is when a single piece of information occupies each line of the paper and works well with a lecture-based passage. It looks like this. One line of the paper for the main idea, the second line for the major detail, then on the third is a supporting detail which talks about the major detail, and the rest will be the same in appearance and process. Notice that when writing a supporting detail, it is a bit indented. It is to make you easily remember that the detail is a support. Two-column note-taking, on the other hand, is used when we listen to a conversation. Here is how it looks like. Simply divide your paper in two columns. One column for each speaker. Then the process of writing information is just the same as the linear method. One line for one piece of information. As said earlier, for one to be effective in listening for details, balance must be practiced. You focus on the lecture or conversation you are listening to, at the same time, concentrate on what to write on paper. But how am I supposed to do this? Isn't it impossible to concentrate on two things at the same time? While note-taking may be a daunting task, there are a few things you can do to make it easier. First is to be selective. Do not just write everything you hear. As what I teach my students, know what you could, should, and must write on paper. What I mean is, the things that you could write are pieces of information that are relatively easy to remember. For example, emotions or inferred mood are not significantly as important as details. While a question may be asked about it, feelings are easily remembered. So there is no need to write this type of information. Next, the things you should have on paper. Simply put, these are details that are slightly harder to retain in the mind. These are solutions to a problem, or the stance of the speaker. These types of details are more important, because when you know the position of the individual speaking, you will have a better idea of how to answer the questions, and eliminate choices. However, these details are easier to recall. You can probably remember the possible solutions and the stance without writing anything down. Then, the must. The musts are details that are very important and difficult to remember. They can be key concepts like the main idea, major details, purpose of a visit, or even task requirements. The mentioned details are rather important, because most of the questions in the listening section will focus on key concepts. In addition, when writing key information, use phrases instead of sentences. By doing so, you will have time to focus on the listening passage. Next, do not worry if you cannot spell a word correctly. Remember, you are the only one who will see what is on your paper, so misspelling the word won't cause any harm. For example, if the speaker mentions a term such as terephyllum, and you are unsure how to spell it, write it accordingly to how you heard it. So it may be written as T, E, R, O, F, Y, L, M. Similarly, you may also use abbreviations like PHIL for the word Philippines, or US for United States. Symbols may also be used. Instead of writing the word increase in full, why not just draw an arrow facing up, or an arrow facing down, instead of writing decrease? This way, you are able to cut down on your writing time, and again pay attention to what you are listening to. Writing notes using your own words is another useful tip for listening. Aside from specific terms, transcribe and write the information you hear using your own words. By doing this, you will have a better grasp of what's on your paper when you need to re-engage with your notes. For example, instead of saying, biofuels are not the best alternative to replace fossil fuels, why not say, biofuels cannot replace fossil fuels? Now let us move forward and talk about the things that you have to take notes of. Remember the two note-taking processes we discussed earlier, and make use of what is appropriate for the passage you are listening to. And so, the first thing to write on your paper is the main idea of a lecture, or the purpose of a conversation. This piece of information is almost always at the beginning part of a listening passage. In noting for the main idea, make use of signal words. The speaker may use expressions like, in today's lecture, today we should discuss, or, after today, we should be able to. These expressions are used to introduce what the speaker will focus on his talk. However, not all lectures will follow the same pattern. I mean, sometimes the speaker will begin by conducting a review of a previous topic, or may first present an argument. In these situations, the best tool again are the expressions that the professor uses. Now listen to a part of a professor's lecture.
Many fish enthusiasts from different parts of the world say that terephyllum ultums cannot prosper in captivity. However, there have been many accounts, both from long-time hobbyists and experienced breeders alike, that the species is able to thrive in home aquaria, and are even able to reproduce in significant numbers.
In this context, notice that the speaker presented an argument that was later on counter-argued or refuted, with the use of the word, however. So in this scenario, the professor is most likely to discuss in her lecture about how the species managed to thrive domestically. As for conversations, often, the purpose is said after a question. For instance,
Hi Johnny, what brings you here?
I am here to register for the campus cleanup day.
or, the purpose can be stated after a greeting. In some occasions, the conversation may right away start with its purpose. For example,
Hi, I am here to register for the campus cleanup day.
by taking note of the main idea of a lecture or the purpose of a conversation, you will have a better grasp of what to watch out for in the succeeding parts of the passage. Next, note down information that follows a transition or a signal word. Similar to the situation when we take note of the main idea of a lecture, or the purpose of a conversation, other important details in a listening passage are often introduced by transitions or signal words. The speaker may use the words first and second to talk about a major detail that illustrates the main idea, or to itemize important categories or points in the talk. For example, the professor may say,
First, the availability of F1 ultums, meaning offspring of wild-caught parents, in some fish stores, is a good indication that the species is thriving in captivity.
with the use of the transition first, we know that the statement that follows it is important and should be taken note of. Likewise, the speaker may also use signal words such as the most important aspect of, in other words, for instance, in conclusion, or similar expressions, to introduce key information. Aside from using transitions and signal words, another apparent clue that the speaker will use is his or her tone of voice. The speaker's tone may change in ways like voice emphasis, change in speed, change in volume, or show emotion. When the speaker varies his or her tone, watch out, because the next piece of information might be important. Remember earlier that feelings or mood may not be written on paper, because they are rather easy to remember, but tone is not just to convey one's feeling or mood. For instance, if the speaker suddenly sounds a bit exaggerated, it may be a sign of emphasis or a contradiction. Or, if the speaker lowers down the volume of his or her voice, it may mean as a sign of acceptance. Be watchful of these situations, because there is a high chance that a question will be asked about them. So the next thing that you should have on paper is when the speaker makes a digression. Digression is the temporary departure from the topic being discussed. In a TOEFL listening passage, digression may also be in a form of a question that a student asks, while the professor is having his lecture. Let us again listen to a part of a lecture.
Take a look at the screen now, and you can see some of these whales. Here is a humpback whale. Notice the rows of balleens in its mouth.
Sorry to interrupt, Professor, but I am just wondering, how do baleen whales get their food?
That is a good question. To answer that, the balleens act like a sieve. Basically, the whale dives through a mass of plankton or krill, and scoops a lot of water in its mouth. Then, it filters the water through the balleens. In the process, the plankton and krill get trapped in its mouth, so it can eat them.
In our example, the part where the student asks a question, and the professor's response to the question is the digression, and like the case of tone of voice, there is a very high chance that a question will be asked about this digression. While some lectures end without a summary, some of them do. As we all know, summary is a wrap-up of important points. So in this situation, note the summary, since it would surely include important information discussed. Other times though, the speaker might end his lecture by indicating what will happen next. For example, he may say, "Next we will look at the different subspecies of Pterophyllum altums." Or, the talk might end like, "In that case, you should better get going." Before we end our lesson, let us first have a recap of the things you should have on paper. First, the main idea of a lecture or the purpose of a conversation. Next, the information that follows a transition or signal word. Then, the speaker's tone of voice. Followed by digression, or the momentary departure from the topic. Lastly, note down the speaker's final remark. By remembering these things, you will be able to efficiently take notes of the important details from a listening passage, as well as give yourself equal time to concentrate on what you are listening to. Not to mention, you won't tire yourself from writing everything you hear. Lastly, to have a higher chance of earning a perfect score in the listening section, it would be best to know your question types and do some practice exercises. I will soon upload lesson videos about the listening question types, where I will also be giving tips on how to make them easier to solve, so watch out. As for practice exercises, after I finish uploading all the lesson videos, they will be next, so watch out for them too. If you have comments, suggestions, and feedback, please feel free to leave them on the comment section, and I will do my best to answer them as fast as I can. Also, please do not forget to press like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so that you'd be informed every time I upload a new video or practice exercise. And always remember, the TOEFL is not difficult, if you know what to do. With that, see you again on the next episode of Learn the TOEFL the Easy Way with Teacher Fish.